The rain poured heavily that evening, drenching the city in a cold embrace. Amid the bustling streets, a lone figure stood beneath a flickering streetlight, a young woman clutching a stack of raffle tickets, her trembling hands betraying the brave smile she wore. In the distance, a sleek black car slowed to a stop, and from it emerged a man whose tailored suit and expensive watch could not hide the loneliness etched in his eyes. As he walked toward the woman, their worlds collided in a single moment of unspoken connection. She called out softly, her voice shaky yet hopeful, offering a ticket for just a few coins. The millionaire paused, captivated not by the tickets but by the quiet strength in her gaze, a strength that spoke of endless nights of struggle and sacrifice. Her clothes were damp and worn, her face pale with exhaustion, but her smile was radiant, as though she had the world to give despite having nothing. Something stirred deep within him, an ache he hadn't felt in years. He purchased a ticket, not for the prize, but for the way her determination shone brighter than the rain-soaked city lights. As their hands brushed, a spark of warmth spread through the cold night. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with genuine gratitude that brought a lump to his throat. He walked away, yet her image lingered in his mind, a reminder of a resilience he had long since lost. That night, as he stared out of the grand windows of his penthouse, the millionaire couldn't stop thinking about her. The raffle ticket seller, who had nothing but seemed to hold on to hope with a grip stronger than his wealth could ever offer. Beneath the polished facade of wealth and power, the millionaire's heart was a battlefield of scars. He had grown up in a sprawling mansion, surrounded by every luxury money could buy, but his childhood had been devoid of warmth. His parents, engrossed in their endless pursuits of status, had seen him not as a son, but as an accessory to their perfect image. The halls of his home had echoed with silence, a void that no amount of riches could fill. Years later, the emptiness remained. Each business deal he closed, each lavish party he attended, was a fleeting distraction from the haunting loneliness that consumed him. He buried his pain in the grind of success, building an empire that stretched across continents, but the hollow ache in his chest never left. Then came that fateful evening in the rain, when he met her. The raffle ticket seller's hopeful eyes reminded him of a time when he had yearned for something as simple and pure as love. Her struggle to survive mirrored his own silent battle to feel whole, yet her strength in the face of adversity humbled him. She had so little, yet her spirit burned with a light he had long since lost. Her smile stirred memories he thought he'd buried, a younger version of himself, sitting alone by the window, dreaming of a life where love mattered more than wealth. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not for his money, but for the broken man he truly was. And in that moment, he realized he was drawn to her, not out of pity, but because her resilience ignited a flicker of hope in his own weary soul. Beneath her radiant smile lay a life woven with endless sacrifices. The raffle ticket seller, a young woman no older than her early 20s, spent her days walking the crowded streets, clutching her tickets as if they were her lifeline. But behind the cheerfulness she showed the world, her reality was far from kind. Each morning began with her tending to her younger brother, whose frail body and hollow cheeks spoke of a long battle with illness. He was her world, the only family she had left after losing their parents in a tragic accident years ago. The small, crumbling apartment they lived in had peeling walls and a leaking roof. Yet she made it a home filled with love and care. Every raffle ticket she sold wasn't just for food or rent. It was for the expensive medication that kept her brother alive. She often skipped meals herself, choosing instead to save every penny for his treatments. At night, she would sit by his bedside, holding his hand and whispering stories of a better future, one where he could run and laugh freely without pain. Despite her struggles, she never let despair show on her face. Her hope, though fragile, was her greatest treasure. It was the anchor that kept her going, even on days when the world seemed unbearably cruel. She believed that as long as she kept smiling, fate might one day smile back. Little did she know, the simple act of selling a raffle ticket to a stranger on a rainy evening would become the turning point in her life, a moment that would intertwine her destiny with a man who had everything but understood her pain like no one else could. The rain still fell in soft sheets as the millionaire lingered, watching the young woman offer her raffle tickets to uninterested passers-by. There was something about her, the quiet determination in her eyes, the way she stood tall despite the weariness in her frame, that struck him deeply. Without hesitation, he approached her again. His heart moved in a way he couldn't explain. "How much for all of them?" he asked, his voice calm yet earnest. She blinked, momentarily stunned by his words, before shaking her head with a hesitant smile. "You don't have to do that," she said softly, clutching the tickets closer to her chest. But he insisted, handing her a thick wad of cash, enough to buy every ticket she held and then some. "Take it," he said, his tone gentle yet firm. "You've worked hard enough today." For a moment, tears welled in her eyes. She hesitated, glancing at the money, then back at him, as though weighing a decision that was heavier than it seemed. Finally, she shook her head, her voice trembling. "I can't take this, it wouldn't feel right." Her refusal wasn't out of pride, but a genuine belief in earning what she deserved. The millionaire was taken aback. It was the first time in years someone had refused his money, not because they didn't want it, but because they valued their dignity more. Moved by her resolve, he folded the cash back into his pocket, but bought the tickets anyway, handing them to strangers on the street. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the connection they had sparked. As they talked, he realized he admired her not for her beauty or kindness alone, but for the strength in her soul, a strength he had long forgotten in his own life. That small gesture became the seed of something greater, a bond born not from pity, but from mutual respect and a shared understanding of struggle. The invitation came unexpectedly, as if the words slipped out before he could stop himself. "Would you like to grab a coffee?" he asked, his tone nervous but warm. She hesitated, glancing at her watch, aware that every minute away from selling tickets could mean less money for her brother's medicine. But something about his sincerity disarmed her, and she found herself nodding with a shy smile. The coffee shop was small and cozy, its warm glow a stark contrast to the cold rain outside. As they sat across from each other, an easy conversation began to flow. At first, it was simple, talk of the weather, their favorite foods. But soon, the walls they had both built over years of pain began to crumble. She told him about her brother, her voice cracking as she described his fragile health and the dreams she held onto for him. "I want him to go to school one day, to laugh and play like other kids," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But sometimes, it feels like I'm fighting a battle I can't win." His chest tightened as he listened, her words a mirror to the loneliness he had carried for so long. In turn, he opened up about his own life, the emptiness of his wealth, the shallow relationships that surrounded him, and the ache of a childhood where love was nothing more than a distant idea. "I have everything," he admitted, his voice heavy, "but I've never felt truly happy." Hours passed as they poured their hearts out, each confession drawing them closer. The world outside faded away, and for the first time they both felt truly seen. By the time the coffee had gone cold, they realized that something unspoken had shifted between them, a bond rooted in shared pain and a flicker of hope for a brighter tomorrow. Days after their heartfelt conversation, the millionaire found himself unable to forget the pain in her eyes when she spoke about her brother. Her love for him, the sacrifices she made, and the hope she clung to despite her struggles left an indelible mark on his heart. Determined to help, he quietly made a phone call to a private hospital, arranging for her brother's medical treatment to be fully paid for under the guise of an anonymous donor. The young woman's life took an unexpected turn when she received a call from the hospital a few days later. The doctor's words felt surreal. "Your brother's treatment has been covered in full," he explained gently. "An anonymous benefactor wanted to make sure he gets the care he needs." She froze, the phone trembling in her hand. Her eyes filled with tears as relief washed over her like a tidal wave. She rushed to her brother's side, her hands shaking as she hugged him tightly, whispering, "We can finally get you better." The little boy, too young to grasp the magnitude of the moment, simply smiled up at her, his trust in her unwavering. As joy mingled with disbelief, she couldn't help but wonder who had performed such a miracle. She replayed every interaction she'd had in her mind, from kind strangers to her regular customers. No one stood out, except him. Could it have been the millionaire? But why would he do something so generous without saying a word? Her heart wrestled with gratitude and curiosity, but she knew better than to ask. Whoever the benefactor was, they had given her the one thing she could never buy herself: time. Time to see her brother laugh again, to hope for a future she thought was slipping away. Unbeknownst to her, the millionaire watched from afar, content to remain in the shadows. For him, seeing her smile and hearing about her brother's progress from mutual acquaintances was enough. He didn't need recognition or thanks. Helping her was reward enough. But the connection between them was undeniable. And though she didn't know it yet, this act of kindness would only draw their lives closer together. It was a quiet evening under a star-filled sky when the millionaire finally gathered the courage to speak his truth. The two walked side by side along a tranquil path, the moonlight casting a silver glow over the world around them. The sound of crickets filled the air, but his heart pounded so loudly it drowned out everything else. "I need to tell you something," he began, his voice hesitant yet filled with sincerity. She looked up at him, her expression curious but soft. "I was the one who paid for your brother's treatment," he admitted, his words hanging in the air like a fragile thread. Her steps faltered, and she turned to face him, her eyes wide with a mix of emotions: gratitude, surprise, and something deeper. "You," she whispered, struggling to process his revelation, but he wasn't finished. Taking a deep breath, he continued, "I've admired you from the moment I met you. Your strength, your kindness, your unwavering hope, it's all I think about. I've built my life on wealth, but meeting you made me realize what I've been missing all along." Her heart swelled with emotion, tears pooling in her eyes as she listened. Yet as his words sank in, a heavy weight settled in her chest. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "You've been so kind to me, but—" She hesitated, looking away. "Our lives are so different," she finally said, her voice breaking. "You belong to a world I could never fit into. I'm just a raffle ticket seller trying to survive, and you deserve someone who can stand beside you as an equal." He reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. "You are my equal," he said firmly. "In every way that matters, you're more than I ever hoped to find. I don't care about where you come from. I care about who you are." Despite his words, fear gripped her heart. The idea of opening herself up to a world so far removed from her own felt overwhelming. With tears streaming down her face, she gently pulled her hand away. "I need time," she whispered before walking away, leaving him standing beneath the moonlight, his heart aching but determined to prove that their love could overcome anything. News of their budding romance spread like wildfire, igniting a storm of whispers, judgment, and cruelty. The millionaire's family was the first to strike. At an opulent dinner, his mother's sharp voice cut through the tension. "A raffle ticket seller? Are you out of your mind? She's only after your money." Her words, laced with disdain, were a dagger to his heart. The public wasn't any kinder. Tabloids painted her as a gold digger, splashing her face across headlines with cruel captions. Social media buzzed with hateful comments, mocking her humble background and accusing her of scheming to trap him. Strangers she'd never met looked at her with scorn, their judgment weighing heavily on her already burdened shoulders. At first, she tried to ignore it, focusing on her brother and the quiet moments she shared with the man she loved. But the accusations grew louder, more vicious, until even her small, safe world felt invaded. Walking through the market, she overheard whispers and saw people pointing, their expressions filled with pity or contempt. One evening, as they sat together, she looked at him with tear-filled eyes. "Maybe they're right," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't belong in your world. I never will." He took her hands in his grip firm yet gentle. "You belong with me," he said fiercely. "I don't care what they say. I see you for who you are, and that's all that matters." But the weight of society's judgment was crushing. Determined to prove her worth, not to them, but to herself, she made a decision. "If I'm going to stand by your side, I need to do it on my own terms," she told him. Not as someone people pity, but as someone they respect. She threw herself into work, taking odd jobs and studying at night, all while caring for her brother. Each step she took was fueled by the desire to rise above the labels others had placed on her. The journey was grueling, but with every small victory, she felt stronger, more confident in her ability to carve out her own place in the world. Though society continued to watch with critical eyes, she refused to let their judgment define her. She would prove, not with words, but with actions, that her love for him was real and untainted by greed. And in doing so, she began to see her own strength, the strength that had drawn him to her in the first place. The weight of the world seemed to press down on her shoulders as the criticisms continued, poisoning the one thing that had given her hope, her love for him. The endless judgment from society, the whispers, the accusations, it all became too much. She watched as the man she loved, the one who had stood by her when no one else would, began to suffer under the cruel gaze of the world. One evening, as she stood by the window, the decision came to her like a whisper in her heart. She couldn't let him carry the burden of her past, of the world's prejudice. His life, his family, his future, he deserved all of it without the weight of her struggle pulling him down. She couldn't be the cause of his pain, no matter how much she loved him. The next morning, she packed her things quietly, each movement filled with heartache. She wrote him a letter, pouring her soul into each word. "I love you," she wrote, "but I cannot be the reason your world is torn apart. You deserve a future free from the burden of judgment. I'm leaving because I can't bear to be the one who holds you back. I will always love you, but you must live your life without me." As she left the small town, the city lights fading behind her, her heart shattered with each step. She didn't want to leave him, but she believed it was the only way to protect him from the cruel world they lived in. The night she left, the millionaire stood at his window, staring out into the dark, unaware of the sacrifice she had made. When he found the note, his heart nearly stopped. "She's gone," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "She left to protect me, but what about us?" She kept her distance, traveling from town to town, unable to stay in one place for too long. But even as her heart longed for him, she knew she had done the right thing. She had chosen his happiness over her own, and that love, pure and selfless, would remain in her heart forever. Devastated by her sudden disappearance, the millionaire felt as if the world had lost its color. His heart ached with the emptiness of her absence, and he realized how deeply he had come to depend on her love. He threw every resource at finding her, private investigators tracing her last known movements, even using his wealth to search through every town she might have fled to. The more he searched, the more he understood. Life without her felt like an existence he couldn't bear. No amount of wealth or power could fill the void she had left in his heart. Weeks passed with no word from her, but the millionaire's love for her never waned. Determined to find her, he traced her steps and finally learned of the small town where she had been working, at a local raffle draw. With a heart full of resolve, he decided to attend, not as the man she had known, but disguised as an ordinary man, hoping to blend in without drawing attention. He entered the crowded hall, his heart racing as he scanned the room. There she was, standing at the booth, handing out tickets with the same hopeful smile, her spirit unbroken despite the hardships. He couldn't stop himself from walking toward her, his eyes locked on her every movement. As he reached the booth, she looked up, and in that instant, their gazes met. Time seemed to stand still. Her eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, the world around them ceased to exist. The raw emotion between them, the longing, the hurt, and the unspoken love, was palpable. She took a step back, unsure whether to run or embrace him. But then, without thinking, he reached for her hand, and in that moment, the crowd felt the intensity of their connection. Tears filled their eyes, and murmurs of disbelief spread through the audience. This was no ordinary reunion. It was the kind of love that defied every barrier. "Why did you leave?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. She struggled to hold back tears, her voice trembling. "I thought I was protecting you," she said, her words barely audible. But in that brief exchange, they both understood. Life without each other was something neither could endure. Without another word, he pulled her into an embrace, and the crowd, moved by the raw sincerity of their love, erupted in applause, as if witnessing the kind of love stories only told in fairy tales. Despite the odds stacked against them, they stood together, their love growing stronger with each passing day. The judgment of society, the harsh whispers, the vast difference in their worlds, none of it mattered anymore. In each other's eyes, they found a refuge, a place where wealth and class meant nothing. One evening, under the soft glow of the setting sun, he took her hands in his heart pounding with nervous excitement. "I don't care about my wealth," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I don't care about the expectations of the world. I only care about you, your heart, your soul, everything that makes you, you." With tears in her eyes, she nodded, feeling the sincerity of his words. And there, on that quiet evening, he dropped to one knee, looking up at her with a heart full of love. "Will you marry me? Not as a millionaire, but as a man hopelessly in love with you."